past, with the Choral Expo, we've always had high school choirs and a professional group, one or two professional groups on the stage. And this year I wanted to show that we could have a primary choir, secondary choirs and professional groups all sharing the same stage. The quality changes certainly because treble choirs sound different to fully fledged professional quartets, right. But certainly the quality is excellent all the way through.
220 students from 16 Hunter high schools had their one and only rehearsal today, a logistics exercise that would have the most hardened military general baffled. Rehearsing conductor John Gray also had his moments. But in the end, the rehearsal was harmonious. The 2-hour Choral Expo will start at 7 tonight, with tickets at the door.
Well, we have a forum here tonight for choral music, to show the excellence of choral music in our schools. It's a great opportunity for Newcastle audiences to see what was in the Opera House only last month and to see some excellent choirs from our schools.
Newcastle Grammar School on the corner of New Common and Church Streets has just over 600 students enrolled. It began a major redevelopment program last year with construction of a building for its junior students at a cost of $2 million. The next stage will see the Parnell building, constructed in the 1920s, demolished to make way for a new complex up to 4 stories high. The school's 410 senior students will use the new classrooms and facilities. Newcastle Grammar School headmaster Alan Green says demand has prompted the development.
Yes, it's another major step, but again our enrolments are such that we're able to continue to develop the site, and this is a very exciting time in the life of the school.
Even though the Parnell building is located in the Hill Conservation Area, it's not considered a heritage item. A development proposal has been lodged with Newcastle Council, and the school is hoping to begin work at the end of the year.
A person with dyslexia may see the written page as a swirl or as a seesaw where the lines move up and down and flow into each other. Some sufferers say the words form a river effect running down the page. Professor Helen Erlin says as we read, our brains process information through light waves. These light waves are made up of the colours of a rainbow.
If some of these light waves or some of the colors like blue or yellow comes in too fast or too slow, then that visual information is distorted. And what happens is we see things happening to the page, and so it can't be read right.
In 1982, Professor Erlin was working on a research project at California University when she discovered that coloured lenses could reduce the distortions experienced by a person who's dyslexic. Sister Judith McGowan has been wearing green-coloured glasses since 1985. She says they've improved her ability to read because they've expanded the amount she can see on the page.
That makes it much easier because you don't have to have as many eye movements across the page, and therefore you can take in more at a time. Not only you can see more, but you can comprehend more.
Professor Erlin is taking part in a seminar at Newcastle University this weekend. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The importance of tomorrow's game hasn't been lost on the Falcons. If they get back on the rails and rack up a few wins, they could be back in 4th spot before the playoffs. And 4th spot is strategically the ideal place on the ladder. Captain Terry Dozier has a lot on his mind following the death of his cousin in the United States and will fly home on Sunday for the funeral. The Falcons beat the Cannons in the first round, and if they play the whole game like they started last week's, there isn't a team who can stand in their way. Leading the decibel charge will be the indoor bike races at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre tomorrow night. The floor is again being covered with clay to form an extremely tight circuit, and when you get them 4 wide you can expect someone's going to come off second best. Local riders will be among the state's best, burning the methanol from 7 o'clock. And at Raymond Terrace, the next round of the State Hill Climb Series will go ahead whether the track is wet or not. Cars that are able to qualify for road registration and other pure sporty types will make up the field, all of their drivers determined to push it.
The times have got down very fast, and to win your class, in any class at all, you've got to be going really quick. And most of the cars are right on the edge, right on the limit of being out of control at times in a lot of the corners.
Most cars cover the 1100 metres of track in just over 30 seconds. And the Newcastle Kart Racing Club will host the final round of the City Series at their West Walls End track over the weekend. Points from this weekend's competition will determine the series winners after they've been competing for 6 months.
You don't often see this many people on horseback, but for more than 300 enthusiasts, that was the mode of transport from Clarencetown to Morpeth in the Hunter Valley today.
Why not? You know, it's a great way to spend a Saturday, isn't it? You know, and we're helping somebody.
Every step taken earned money for the NBN cancer appeal. It's expected that more than $15,000 will be raised. There was time for a barbecue during the 35-kilometre journey before the ride finished at the Royal Hotel at Morpeth.
The convoy of 300 Volkswagens were led into town by a police escort. Then the car owners parked their pride and joys in the street for everybody to see. Everything from the more commonly known Volkswagen Beetles and Combi vans to the rare Carmen Ghia were on show. One of the organisers of the event, Steve Mueller, has more than 20 V-dubs himself. However, he knows there are many more of the German-made cars left in the world.
Worldwide, the Beetle, there's 21 million of them and they're still being produced today in Mexico. In Australia, we have something like left on the roads in Australia, 140,000.
People from as far as America, New Zealand and all Australian states have travelled to Nambucca for the 3-day event. Some of the owners described why they had fallen in love with the V-dub.
Well, I married a man that had one. That's over 30 years ago and I've driven nothing else since.
The best thing about a VW is it never breaks down.
Never?
Well, sometimes, but you get a good run out of them.
I think it's an extension of your character. You can express yourself in a Volkswagen and it's still an individual. I think that's the best thing, and they're so easy to work on, and they are a classic design like the Coca-Cola bottle. Everyone in the world knows them.
It becomes part of the family. It just happens to sleep in the garage.
Residents in boats and on foot turned up in force for the unveiling of a plaque to recognise the part the river played in the development of the area. The site is on the northern bank of the Wilson River, between the old butter factory and the former railway master's residence. The special day was organised by the Telegraph Point Primary School, following research into the history of local rivers.
A government wharf would carry timber, but it would also carry groceries, hides, anything that they needed. The steamers used to come up from Sydney and pull in at these wharves.
The government wharf became the transportation hub for many industries in the Telegraph Point area. The wharf remained operational until World War II, when it lost its own battle against age. Members of the Port Macquarie branch of the National Association for Loss and Grief converged in the Uniting Church Hall in Horton Street for the one-day workshop. Music therapy, according to Hazel Peters, can be used to help people cope with tragedy. She also said music can be used to soothe a woman in labour or as therapy for disabled people such as those with cerebral palsy.
It may be comparatively new. I don't believe it's a new innovation. I just believe that most of us don't realise the incredible power of music.
Hundreds of youngsters converged on the RSL to see their schoolmates perform. 4 categories are being contested in the awards. The best Year 12 student is picked through their comparing skills, then the other divisions, entertainment, dancing and modelling. One of the past winners, and now a television star on the soap Paradise Beach, John Bennett, made an appearance at the RSL today. So too did Miss Australia, Vonnie Del Foss, and male model Nathan Harvey. The crowd was impressed. The winners tonight will receive $250 and compete in the grand final at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre in October. The Year 12 student who wins the grand final will pocket a cool $5,000 and the other 3 champions will receive $1,000 each.
At 42, Deborah Mills has had a varied career. She's worked in areas of social welfare for both state and federal governments and has held management positions with the Australia Council and Greenpeace. But now the social science degree graduate hopes to use all her skills to provide an important link between council and the community. The new director is the only woman heading one of 5 council departments.
I think the glass ceiling does operate, unfortunately, for women in management in Australia, and I hope I can provide encouragement to women in council so that we can see more women managers in senior positions here.
Targeting cultural diversity, unemployment, aged and youth welfare as top priorities, it's a job she says she's well equipped for.
I'm bringing experience in the cultural field and in the community development field. So at this stage I'm really impressed. Of course there'll be gaps and of course there'll be needs. I don't know what they are yet, but I hope to work with my staff to identify that and with the community and start bringing about some changes there too.
In the Hunter and Central Coast regions last year, more than 38,000 people were investigated for incorrect welfare claims. Of those, 10,000 had their payments cancelled and another 3,000 payments were reduced. Chris Beatson heads the Review and Recovery Department. It's his job to catch those cheating the system.
Well, last year we identified incorrect payments worth about $12.5 million, and we hope that we'll be able to do that again this year.
One way of doing that is a phone-in which began this morning and will run for 2 weeks. The public is being encouraged to call and dob in anyone they believe may be cheating. But the phone line has been strongly criticised by some community groups, including the Newcastle Out of Workers.
I and this organisation, the Outer Workers, have been involved working with unemployed people since 1977. I would think the last 2 years has been the first time where we seem to have got away from the dole-bludger picture. The community is genuinely concerned about the social problems, and here we have the department that's funding it, implying that a lot of these people are stealing from the government.
Chris Dodds also believes the phone-in is an invasion of privacy and brings many innocent people under unnecessary investigation. But the department disagrees. While all calls must be investigated, Mr Beatson says privacy will be protected. The phone number is 008 621 144. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Stephen Hudson is just 13 years old and already he's mixing it with the greats of the opera world. Stephen has a treble role in the Newcastle University Choir's latest production, Elijah, a 19th century work of Felix Mendelssohn. Being performed by the largest contingent of the choir to date, Elijah is the story of an Old Testament prophet and the miracles performed by Jehovah. Well-known baritone and lead Robert Ullman and tenor George Tevius are now performing with the Australian Opera in Sydney. They're expected to join the Newcastle rehearsals on Friday. Conducted by the experienced Peter Brock, Elijah will be a one-performance-only show held at the university's Great Hall on Saturday night.
The Ashton family circus has spent 150 years travelling from town to town, bringing with it the big top and for many what might be a once-in-a-lifetime chance of seeing lions, tigers and elephants. But there are others who turn out agitating for bans to be implemented against circuses with animals, accusing the operators of cruelty.
And our issue is animals in cages.
We'd like to see all animal acts stopped.
Someone can say something 2 words and they can accuse you of something with 2 words, and you've got to justify it with a paragraph or a chapter sometimes.
Lorraine Ashton Grant is a fifth-generation circus family member and after a life on the road now finds herself fighting for survival. She spent today preparing to defend the circus at a city council meeting. It's paper warfare waged over local government boundaries, state lines and overseas against a powerful minority movement.
We in the animal rights movement believe that all animals have as much rights as humans, that they are a biological entity and they have needs and they're designed a certain way by nature, and that keeping them in cages or abusing their rights in any way is wrong because they have as many rights as us.
350,000 Australians show their support for the circus each year by buying tickets. Numerous tours give children their first glimpse of exotic animals, kept under strict government regulation.
It's not only what the councils and the laws say, we also have our own moral standard, our own standard that we have to live up to, which exceeds the government standards.
Earlier this year, the Environment Protection Authority tested 500 properties near the Pasminco lead smelter in Bullaroo. The first 100 results are now back. 94 of the properties have a level of lead in the soil above 300 parts per million, the level regarded as safe by the National Health and Medical Research Council. Of those, 92 have a level of lead below 5,000. According to Brian Gilligan of the Environment Protection Authority, that level is not too serious, but owners will be advised to take certain action.
It becomes a question of perhaps looking at things like if you've got worn patches in your lawn where you're having trouble getting grass to grow, well, you should look at, or at least consider the option of sealing that surface with paving or with concrete or something.
What is of a concern, however, is that 2 properties have levels of lead in the soil above 5,000 parts per million. That's 16 times the safe level.
5,000 is the level that we've identified in our risk reduction suggestions where it becomes worth considering whether it might be necessary to actually take soil off-site.
Results of the other 400 properties should be known by the end of the month.
If we're finding that in fact those properties with quite high soil lead levels are corresponding with those households where the kids have got high blood lead levels, well then in conjunction with the public health unit and other people we'll look at whether those houses and those households need some further advice, a bit more guidance or whatever support they need.
The 50 members at last night's annual meeting had no worries in granting the association's 10th life membership. In the 100-year history of the association, Duchy Holland is the only life member to be granted the honour for service on the playing field. The other 9 were honoured for their work in administrative circles. It was hard for the association to ignore the achievements of Duchy Holland. He won his first Test cap at the ripe age of 38 in 1984 and went on to take 34 wickets for Australia. He almost single-handedly won the 1984 Test for Australia, taking a mighty 10-wicket haul against the West Indies. In the same style that he played his cricket, Duchy Holland accepted his life membership graciously.
The region awoke to a bleak Wednesday, but hopes of conditions improving were dashed, with temperatures remaining 5 degrees below average. A low-pressure cell developing off the coast between Newcastle and Sydney brought heavy rainfall during the day. A strong wind warning and the prospect of stronger southerly winds didn't deter surfers from heading to the beach, though. In fact, brolly came in handy for this eager group of bodyboarders. Umbrellas and jackets were compulsory attire for shoppers who headed into Newcastle's central business district, but with midday temperatures of only 9 to 11 degrees, one way to beat the elements was to head for an establishment offering an open fire. The Weather Bureau expects the low off the coast to move quickly overnight, with conditions clearing by the weekend.
One of the worst hit ports would be Newcastle. 19 of its 39 waterfront workers face redundancy. However, the Maritime Union has set out to prove that the company not only needs all its present workers, but maybe more.
We've clearly indicated to the employers that this debate, as far as we're concerned, will not be about surplus labour. It will be about increasing employment on the waterfront and recruiting people into the industry.
Imports of timber and general freight, together with exports of steel and aluminium, will be affected by the work ban. Jim Boyle says that after just one day of the ban, a stockpile of timber is already building in Newcastle.
The bans won't be lifted until we receive a satisfactory response from the employers, indicating their preparedness to sit down and discuss the matter with us. At the moment, they've just a total refusal to even discuss the matter.
There'll be an urgent hearing tomorrow in the Industrial Relations Commission in Sydney in an attempt to resolve the dispute. A month ago, residents of King Street, Shortland became aware of a new house in their neighbourhood. The former Housing Commission property was trucked in from Raymond Terrace and unloaded onto this vacant block of land. It was 5 days after that residents received notification that it would be arriving. They say they should have been told earlier.
What I want to ask the council is why was all this work allowed to be done without us getting to know anything? Why were we kept ignorant of the fact until the place was arrived and put here?
Director of Health and Building Services Harold Stewart says council was not told of the house until a building application was lodged, and that's when residents were first notified. He says that issue will be dealt with when the submission comes up for consideration. What council won't enter into, however, is a claim by residents that the house is in breach of a covenant which bans pre-built houses from being erected there. That, Mr Stewart says, is up to the residents to fight out in a civil court. Bill Hutchins and Jan and Tom Ravenscroft say they will fight to have the house removed.
This one's a dump. Complete rubbish. And most of it was gone.
Members of the 77 Squadron start their working day just like anyone else. Clean the windscreen, fill up the tank, and make a few minor adjustments before setting out into the traffic. But that's where the similarities end. These fighters are off to tackle waves of enemy aircraft attacking from the north.
What we're doing here is we're sitting alert on the ground, and when the radars pick up the incoming raids, we're scrambled up to meet them. So that's the role we're flying.
The friendly or blue force is made up of FA-18 squadrons, radar detection and missile units, taking on the attacking orange force of United States Air Force fighters and bombers and jets from the Republic of Singapore's Air Force. Although this threat is fictitious, Australia learnt its vulnerability to air attack from the north with the bombing of Darwin during World War II. Pitch black is being conducted in the same skies that saw mortal combat between aircraft and crews. These invaders are more powerfully equipped, but the lighter Hornets are attempting to throw up a defensive web of the top end.
It's a little hard to sort of cut through the fog of war and find out exactly what's happened, but we've been relatively pleased with the way it's gone so far. The F-15 is a more powerful air defence fighter. It has a better radar than the F-18, but we have some other advantages.
Newcastle Council has provided a recycling service for those who visit the Shortland Tip, but the task of reducing landfill waste is about to enter its next phase. Residents will soon join thousands of others across the state who have recyclable waste collected from outside their homes. Charles Pascoe, who collects material for recycling in Scone and Gloucester, has won the Newcastle contract despite a concern about the viability of the tender. He believes the best tender was accepted.
The best choice is the cheapest choice, and if we can get somebody who's done it before. This bloke has, he's got a track record of recycling. It's his business. He wants to build it into a big business, and he can look after, I'm quite sure, not only Newcastle, but our neighbouring councils also.
Meantime, Maitland has defended its decision to increase dumping fees at the new Delta Tip.
Well, it was always anticipated that the fees would have to increase. There's no question about that. At the old tip, the fees were low. The service we were providing was minimal, but the new tip will involve additional staff for a start. So there's an additional cost there.
Amongst the reasons for the $1 to $1.50 rise is to cover the cost of replacing machinery for the facility and to meet new guidelines for garbage services. Work on the new dump is nearing completion, with the site to open on August 24.
Oyster farmer Jeff Deemer says he's no greenie, but sees his livelihood threatened and an environmental catastrophe looming for the waterways.
We're not going to allow to die.
What the government has done is lowered the standards. That out of the way, we can get on in sewer, but we must do it right.
The planned sewage treatment works are long overdue for Karua and Bulladila, but it's the disposal of effluent that has people worried.
Where the outlet is proposed for Karua in Reedy Creek, it's all tidal, and this creates a recirculation where it's going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and there'll be massive build-ups, as is happening even with a little bit of problem with septic tanks. It will be just a complete cesspool in the time to come.
The bacteria and nutrients released as effluent remain active for up to a month and would feed algae in the river. Build-ups can lead to toxic algae blooms experienced on inland rivers and more recently the Hawkesbury. The oyster growers are urging authorities to consider alternatives subject to EISs.
We could spray it onto forests and make sure we have land disposal of that wastewater.
Do you think these are practical alternatives?
The EISs have to be done, but there's no reason why they can't. It might cost a little more, but we can't afford to jeopardise the water conditions in Port Stephens.
The students from Blackall's Park at Lake Macquarie were under the long arm of the law. The New South Wales Police Band was giving the youngsters some good advice on keeping on the beat. It's the 5th year the boys in blue have made the trip, and it's breaking down the barriers between the students and the force.
It gives a great rapport between the police force and the children, as well as the musical benefits that accrue from the workshops they do with the children.
The police band makes some 300 performances each year, but working with the children is their special treat. It could even end up as a good recruiting drive. Whatever the case, it was a very arresting experience.
The former Basin coal loader site has been given a $3 million revamp by Toll Transport for the company's new container handling operation. A brief ceremony marked the first freight train loading with containers to leave the terminal. Freight Rail is confident the venture will see more containers being moved by rail.
Where it's located, we've got forklifts that are able to come straight up to the rail line, as you can see, and it's strategically located close to the Hunter ports, so they can get access straight to the ports. They can get access to most of the industrial complexes around here, and we can see quite a impact as far as Freight Rail is concerned.
The Basin facility replaces Toll's facility at Sandgate and handles both import and export containers. Toll Transport's David Streetfield says the company aims to double container ship movements through the port.
We're hopeful that within the next 12 months there'll be a second container caller that calls on a regular basis to Newcastle, and hopefully by the services that Toll can now offer right on the waterfront, this will entice another shipping line to start calling.
The terminal is seen as an integral part of plans to open export trade from the northwest of the state through the Port of Newcastle to avoid the bottleneck in Sydney.